So welcome to this episode of In the Half-Light, Voices from Black Ireland. Today we'll be talking to three people who've written about their own lives and experiences of growing up mixed race in Ireland. They come from different generations and different parts of Ireland, and each has chosen to tell their story in their own way. What we're interested in today is not just the events themselves, but how memory works and what feels possible to say at different points in one life, but also how personal storytelling becomes a way of making sense of a society that leaves these experiences out of the record. So I'd like to introduce you to Marguerite, Jackie and Leon.
My mum knew something was up the minute I walked out the school door. "Leon, are you all right?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm okay." But deep down, I wasn't okay. Something was off. I couldn't really explain why. I just started school, but I already knew some of the kids in the class, and the school was only around the corner, so things should have been fine, but they weren't. I plodded along beside Mam for a couple of minutes on our short walk home, not saying much. She continued with her questions. I obviously wasn't very good at lying. I mean, I was only 4. "Leon, if something is making you sad, you can tell me." My mum was concerned something bad had happened or someone was picking on me. "I'm okay, Mam. It's just..." I was struggling to figure out how to say it. "It's just what?" She stopped walking and stooped down to my level. Though she didn't have to stoop far, because at the age of 4, I was nearly as tall as she was. I finally blurted out, "It's just that there's loads of white kids, a couple of black kids, but I'm the only brown kid." Mam took a couple of seconds to think. You see, she didn't look like me either. She was a white woman in a mostly white neighbourhood raising a mixed race kid. She was probably struggling to figure out it as much as I was. "It's okay, you're no different to other kids. You're just Leon," she said cheerfully, probably relieved that nothing serious had happened. Mam had a great way of making me feel better, but deep down, something inside me was still uneasy about being the only brown kid. Although I didn't know it yet, this would be the first of many times that I would separate myself from others.
I am just one woman who has never been in the public eye before, but the circumstances of my birth and adoption, the wonderful family life with which I have been blessed, and my experience as a child born into Irish institutional care, as a black Irish woman, as an active, happy person with a significant disability, all shed light in all sorts of unexpected ways on our shared history as a nation, as Irish people, and I sincerely believe in how we can work together to make our society a better and more nurturing place for us all. So here I am, this is me.
Were there certain things that you found easy to write about? Were there things that you avoided? And how did you make those decisions?
I would say, funnily enough, the traumatic things were easier to write about. Because when I spoke about the industrial school and how I ended up there simply because I was an illegitimate child of colour, they were things that I had put away in a box. And it took me a long time to be able to hold little Jackie's hand and see. And I suppose it was only later in life I adopted my youngest daughter. And when I went to therapy, not to deal with the industrial school, but to deal with a breakup. And within dealing with the breakup, it took me back to why it broke down, why I was looking for love, why did the breakup bring me to my knees? I'm so resilient. I could go out and play against England on my own rather than go through a heartache.
Yeah.
So they were the questions I started to ask, and I started to find that because of my start in life, the little Jackie inside me was, "Please love me. Please see me. Please love me. I want you to love me." And within that, learning that my self-esteem was so low, that I would make the jokes at my own expense, that I wanted to fit in to a society that didn't really accept me. So within my resilience, it became people were, "Oh, look at you played soccer and rugby for Ireland." I went and I played that sport. So I could stand in front of an Irish flag, sing our Rán Navían and say, "Look at me, can you see me? I am Irish. I am Irish because that sense of wanting to be loved and the sense of identity that wearing the green jersey gave me was so important. And like, I had an incident where my Irish soccer jersey was gone, and I was like, the resilience came out again. I was back in that industrial school less than, but I was determined to get up. And within 6 months, I was playing for Munster, and 6 months later, I was back on the Irish rugby team. And when people said, "Oh, you're brilliant, you're brilliant," they don't understand why I'd done it.
Yeah, yeah.
And in writing the book, when my friends pick up the book, they're like, "I didn't know that about you. I thought you love sport." Yes, I love sport, but the drive that was behind it was from something else completely. Trying to prove myself, trying to bring up that self-esteem. And on the soccer pitch or the rugby pitch, my head was high. When I came back off the pitch, I was the black person again. And I suppose it's why I played sport up into my 40s. You know, I played my last match in Thomond Park and went, "Come on, Jack, you have to stop." You know, and then it was that kind of sense of wanting to belong. And it's funny when I look at you in particular, Leon, with Black and Irish, and you knowing so much at such a young age, because you're way younger than me. And I'm like, I'm in awe of you and going, "Oh, why? I wish I met him earlier. You know what? I could, you know, grow from you." And I remember having a conversation with Emer O'Neill about 2 years back. And I had met her at the Black and Irish event and at the Claire Byrne show, and we became friends. And Emer turned to me and she said, like, "I wish I knew you. Why didn't I know there was a black superstar?" And I was like, "Who?" And she said, "You." And I said, "No, Emer, don't be. I feel like an imposter now because that's not why I played sport. And it was, you know, it was just to be." But she said, "You're the first black woman to play both codes." And I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not what it is. You don't get me. You don't get me." And you whitewash over why it is. And she started to cry. And she said, "You could have helped me so much if I could have picked up a book and read about you." And I'm like, "But there was nothing to know about me, and what you might think you want to know about me, I might be ashamed of because I'm doing this for the wrong reasons." And when I went to Black and Irish, and you said to me, like, the whole room's going to celebrate you, you've done us proud. I'm going, no, I'm an imposter coming in here. You know, he doesn't know. And I'm like, wow, he can talk like that. He can articulate how I feel and how important it is for me to be seen. So there's moments like that, even into my 60s, where I'm still growing. And even sitting here with both of you today and seeing, you know, your stories, what you have come through, and what it makes mine real as well. It's like you, what's the word I'm looking for? You validate my story as well. Even though we're 3 different generations, we still have in part the very same story. We're still fighting for the same thing. Like for me, it's now for my grandchildren, so that they're not racially profiled in any way. It's kind of sad in a way also that we're still talking in the same way. I hear in your stories you're experiencing the very same thing. That makes me sad.
And I think what makes me sad listening to you as well, Jackie, is the proving yourself. Like, I actually feel sick about some of the things that I did to try and prove to people that I was a good person, and, you know, trying to feel, you know, that I belong, you know, even though like so many people accepted me for who I am, which is great. I think it's about learning to accept yourself, Leon, as you were saying, and that you're 100% yourself. I loved that you're 100% me. You don't have to be 50-50. You don't have to be black, whatever, you know. I think that's a big thing. And I'm still learning today, the proving yourself. And like my mum always said to me, you know, and she still even says it now when I go out, "Oh, how many friends will you gather tonight?" You know, when I go out, because I talk to everyone. I'm really social. And I don't know, I think, like, as we were saying, from being younger, when you're growing up, I think you have to prove everything. You know, there was, with a disability, like I wasn't good at sport, you know, I had loads of things against me as well. So in other ways, I became a stronger person, as in the chatty person, you know, the empath, the friend that listened. So that was my role in life, you know, and I've quite protective of people as well. So I think when I look back at things I did to, make myself shine, whereas I felt like I always had to prove myself, if somebody gave you that look and I'd be saying, oh, they don't really like me now. And everybody like, no, don't be silly. Well, that vibe, that racism vibe, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
And that they are racist against you. And everyone, like years ago, they'd be saying, oh, I think you're just imagining it, and that would just get me so annoyed. That way I'd be like, but why don't people believe?
And that's the thing, isn't it? That you become the aggressor if you say it out.
And then as well, I felt like I had to win them back. I had to win them over. So say when I worked in retail, I was like a manager in a shop. And, people would bypass me and they'd be like, oh, I want to speak to the manager. And, the girls turn around and say, oh, Marguerite's the manager. And you could see the look first that they'd give you, And then I'd be like, oh, this isn't going to go well, And then they were so pleasantly surprised, and like they'd nearly be hugging you but they came in and looked at you with this different attitude. Yeah, not everybody, obviously. There were so many people that were actually so curious that they wanted to be your friend. Yeah. They wanted to learn. They'd ask the questions, so what the proving myself thing, I'm very, very guilty of it, in the past. And that's one thing that, I think, Leon, for yourself as well, as Jackie and I were saying, like, you're much younger than us. Like, you're so well educated on it. You're so confident as well. And it's all work that you've done yourself, because everything we've done is work that we've done to get us to this spot. But I love the way that younger people have more confidence, whereas I didn't have that when I was younger. And even now, I come across very confident, but I'm not a confident. And people don't believe me. And I'm like, no, I do this, like, publicly speaking. I know I don't like it, but I do it because I feel, how can people learn? How can people educate themselves? And how can we move forward? If we're all sitting here with all these experiences and we're not talking about them, so.
Did you leave anything out of the book that you thought might be hard for other people to hear about your life? Or
do you know what? No, because I said I wanted to be totally honest, and I always speak from my heart and my soul, and that's the way I wrote the book. So if I'm going this far to write a book, I want it to be the truth, so I didn't hold anything back. And there's stuff now that I read and I'm like, oh, cringe. But it's stuff that needed to be written, And again, like Jackie was saying about healing, that was the biggest therapy session that I never thought I was ever going to have, So that gave me such a different, and the freedom to speak, and the freedom to be Black, and the freedom to be disabled. And everybody who said, God, we never knew that about you. We never thought that's the way you felt, feeling unsafe sometimes. Like, I only had this discussion with a friend the other day, and she was saying, like, do you feel unsafe again? And I said, yeah, I do. It's not safe to be out there in Ireland anymore. For a couple of years, it all got okay again, and now it's suddenly, okay, where are you going? What are you doing? Who's looking at you? Is something going to kick off? So, yeah, it's.
What about you, Leon? Did you kind of put it all out there, or were you conscious? And I suppose for all of you, were you conscious that who you were writing for or to, who your reader would be?
Yeah, I think like there was a couple of elements that I didn't think were important, that were more just personal stuff that I was dealing with or going through in terms of like some relations that I had. I mentioned the relationships that I have in the book, but of course there's a lot more to it that I could have written about that I didn't feel would add to what I was trying to do for myself, or for the reader. I mean, the point about proving yourself, I think, is really, really important, and like that manifested very differently for me. So I manifested it in ways of like trying to fit in with the people that I was hanging around with, who at times could be getting into not so good things, engaging in activities that were not that they weren't supposed to.
Let's just say in your book it comes across you made some unwise choices.
I was getting into if my friend group were getting into a fight, I'd be getting into a fight. There's a lot of violence around me at the time, and that, like, I really should have distanced myself from that, but at times I didn't, and those are definitely things that I regret, because I was doing it to that day. It'd be like, he's one of us, do you know what I mean? Yeah, he fits in, so. That was a huge challenge, and I'm proud of myself now because I know I had to go through that, and I hope you're the same. You know, because that's how I view you. You know. And then the socialised element of it as well. I talk to a wall if it talk back to me. Do you know what I mean? Just because now, for a while, it was because of that. Like, I just want to, like, I want you to like me. I want you to get on with me, kind of thing. But now it's like because I recognise what loneliness feels like, and I want to make sure that you don't feel it. You know, and I think we learn from these things, and it helps us to become. You know, I feel the experiences that we go through helps us to become better people.
Oh, exactly.
In my opinion, do you know, not that we're angels or anything. Do you know what I mean?
But you're right. It does build up your character. And, you know, I often think, like, if I wasn't born in a mother and baby home, like, I really put everything to my birth, you know, and how I came into the world. I came into the world in unusual circumstances, shall we say. A bit like yourself, Phil, you know, we didn't go, you know, home with our mothers, you know, and our dads or whatever. We didn't have a family life. You know, I was 3 before I left the mother and baby home. So sometimes I think back and I say, God, like, when you hear the horrible stories, you're kind of thinking, well, I'm glad I can't really remember anything, because that to me is a positive, as in, I don't want to think that something horrible, lots of horrible stuff happened to me. But I think, as you said, it definitely shapes you into the person. And I think I came into this world fighting, and I'll go out fighting, you know, and people are actually interested like that. I didn't think anybody would be interested in me either, Jackie.
Same.
I was like, I'm just an ordinary person, you know, will anybody read it, you know? And like, my parents obviously were so excited. I think, like, I'm like, no, like, I'm not like Prince Harry writing a book, you know. I'm not a celebrity. It's just me. Probably 5 copies will be sold, and they'll be family and friends. So I was already putting myself down. And then when the interest was so huge, like, I couldn't keep up with the messages, like you were saying as well, Jackie. And Leon, I know yourself from even Black and Irish. You know, it's amazing to see that there is that huge interest. And then trying to build on that community, I think, of people that actually are interested and want to form an alliance, shall we say, with us. So it's trying to grow that. This is what we have to do it, because we have to keep talking about it. The message has to keep going through to everybody.
And for me, it's like what Leon said about, you know, we'll talk to anybody, you talk to a wall and whatever. I think the 3 of us have that common thread that I think our start in life, even though they're years apart, it's like, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it makes you an empath. Like you said, when you said about wanting to make sure somebody else isn't lonely, I really feel that sense of burden and responsibility. You know, if I'm in a room and I see somebody on their own, it brings me back to my childhood. You're the only one. So I'll gravitate over there, and here's this black woman coming towards them that they've never spoken. Well, how's it going? How's things? Do you know, how did you get here today? And, you know, before the end of it, we're exchanging phone numbers and we're best friends and we're going to the Munster match. But it's, I love, I suppose, one of the things I embrace through the trauma is that sense of being an empath and the want to be part of something or to be liked is not as important anymore as somebody reminded me somebody else's opinion of me is not my business. And once I could get that in my head, then I could kind of go, well, it's not as important. But I think as Irish, we have this inside thing of us to want to communicate and be part of the tribe. And I look at it in a different way now. It's a different tribe I want to be part of. I want to be part of something that educates, that makes it easier for somebody else, that can reach out in those moments and make sure nobody's left behind, nobody's sitting in that corner. You know, like my book is called We Met a Kid because in Limerick, everybody walks around going, "Abide the kid, how are you, kid? Well done, kid." And like looking back at little Jackie to say, it's okay, we met it. I now haven't read it or written it and read it. It's like I know somebody else is going to hold somebody else's hand in Limerick and say, it's okay, we met it, kid, come on. You know? And it is that sense. That's what I feel more, that I'm more empathetic for having written the book. And I have more of a sense of belonging that I haven't forced.
Yeah.
You know, like having to play for Ireland, having the green jersey. My self-esteem has come up knowing who I am. I know that I'm part of a bigger picture now, and I walk a little bit taller. I know who Jackie McCarthy O'Brien is.
Can I just ask you, one of the things that comes across really clearly in the books is the role of family and how important family is to all of you. And I suppose I found your story of your mother coming to take you out of the institution and not even understanding the concept of family and who the people were, that they might even be such a thing as parents. And that you talk about like people thinking about their mothers, and that you had never even dreamt of a mother because you didn't even know what that was. And I suppose it's really interesting then that family becomes your focus. And you, Marguerite, you write constantly about your parents and the support that they give you throughout. And when you describe your time in hospital, that's quite traumatic. And the fact that they're there constantly, like you say, never giving up. Either.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, in terms of family, because Leon, you talk about your mother, you know, and how she kept everybody going as well. But I suppose what really interested me in reading the stories was you're living life through a racialized lens with all of these white people. And how did you understand that at the time? Because you're not, because you have siblings, but you're the only one, even within your own family. And how did that feel?
For me, I suppose that is when going home with my mother is the trauma, start of the trauma.
Yeah.
I don't know that at the time. It's if I even understood the word family, would have been nuns, very cruel, you know, especially to children of colour in institutions. As, you know, like when looking back, I go, oh my God, last into the bath because I'll dirty the water. How dare they, you know, and always being Blackie O'Brien growing up and not being called by my first name. But for me, going into a white family, back then, it was okay because I didn't see my colour. It was more, they don't look like me. Not knowing that my mother was actually my biological mother until I was 12, that was pretty hard.
Was it not knowing or not feeling? Because it comes across in the book that you don't feel it rather than that you don't.
I don't know it or feel it, because what is the feeling of being part of a family? My family is the 8 or 9 children in the dormitory, wetting the bed together and trying to get a breakfast the next morning, you know, because the punishment was no breakfast if you wet the bed. So my family were the people that made me make rosary beads or scrub the floors and whatever. And I'm out with these people that I don't know or I don't feel anything for, other than, God, they're a bit mad. They're not punishing me and they're giving me food to eat and they're doing all this. And, you know, it's like, it's only on looking back that you can see the damage that's there. It took me 2 years to be with these people, as I called them then, and start to go, Mom, Dad, because the other children were calling them Mom and Dad, feeling the safety. And, you know, my love was self-taught. It literally was self-taught from watching, you know, the Waltons or whatever. Oh, this is what love looks like. This is what a family looks like. John Boy and all of them are part of this. So these people, that's Mom, Dad, and I'm child. Loved is not being slapped for wetting the bed. It's not having food take. That feels good. But it actually takes time to sit with that. So the things that we take for granted, or people take for granted, from a babe in arms, of being rocked, being comforted when, you know, whatever happens to you, that looks completely different to me. I have to teach myself. That's what love looks like. And then within that comes the problem, because nobody goes hungry in the Waltons and everything works out all right. But real life isn't like that. So you go into a crisis mode when something happens that you haven't seen on TV. Hang on a minute. How do I deal with death? How do I deal with grief? How do I deal with being part of this family? Where do I fit in? And then your colour comes into play then from the outside, with other people going, that can't be your brother, that can't be your sister, that can't be your mom and dad. You don't belong there. And it's other people that take away that sense of what you're building up to what you think a family should be. And as I said, coming out of the industrial school, that was the trauma for me in those first 2 years of trying to fit in. Not just dealing with my colour, just dealing with being with complete strangers, you know. It was, and I suppose, I think that's the start of the resilience. And I think my book is a homage to Precious and Mickey O'Brien. Not educated people as we think of education today, but the love and the simple way that they cocoon me from bad people and equipping me in the craziest ways to look within myself and say, do I want to fight this for the rest of my life? Or do I just want to make something of myself in spite of what people think of me? And I think that was the greatest gift that Precious and Mickey O'Brien gave me. So my book is a homage to them as well.
What about you, Leon? I mean, you had siblings who were also mixed like you, so you weren't the only one.
I had a few different people who influenced my kind of racialized experience. So, like, we'll deal with the immediate too, my mother and father. My mother is a wonderful woman who gave me a very good upbringing, you know, as best as she could, despite a lot of the challenges that she faced with my father and stuff like that. You know, and as a white woman, she tried her best to, I suppose, help me to understand that I'm just Leon. You know, so a lot of the kind of rhetoric that I use today is actually her teachings, you know, just maybe packaged differently. But I do I do prescribe to that now. She struggled a little bit to kind of help me with understanding the kind of black side of myself, as you know, as anyone would struggle, you know. And then there was my father, who quite a volatile human being, you know, came from a different culture, was prone to like substance abuse at times, and could get very violent and stuff like that. But he was very comfortable in his African identity, very confident. You know, I remember someone calling him the N-word, and he said thank you, and he just didn't care. Do you know what I mean? So that was strange, and then becoming disconnected from him. And kind of, you know, obviously having, as a young child, been very angry and very frustrated with him, and finding out that he has another family and that I'm not actually the eldest child, I'm like fifth in the line, you know, that can cause a lot of cognitive dissonance, do you know what I mean? Then there's my brother and sister. Megan is the youngest of the three of us. She didn't necessarily lean too much into her racialized identity. I'm an Irish person, I don't care about any of that. Adam, he stood up for himself more than I did when I was younger, and was the reason why I ended up taking a case against Lewis, because he was the first ever person to stand up to my bully in the big field around the corner from my house. For me, he was always like he was stronger than me when it came to this. When we had an incident then with Lewis security, he was like, man, this stuff happens all the time. And I was just so mad that was what encouraged me to do it. So he's educated me a lot in many different ways. And we travelled together to Senegal for the first time and had lots of different conversations. So there's been many different influences. In fact, then there's actually my maternal grandfather, who had a lot of challenges as well, and was very quick to use my birth as a way of attacking me and stuff like that. You know, so There's people who are positive influences for different reasons, people who are negative influences for different reasons. You have to learn to navigate that and kind of say, right, well, like the end goal is that I'm comfortable in my identity and that I'm comfortable with who I am. That is the end goal, regardless of where that lands. You know, I need to be comfortable with it. I need to be happy with it, because it, like, you know, as has been said, this is it. You don't get to go back to the, you know, the Wheel of Fortune and go, maybe I'll land on white this time. You know, so it's about making the best of what you have. But my family have mostly been, you know, a really kind of positive force in my identity shaping.
Did they get you? Do you think your white families got you? They understood what you were going through?
To a certain extent, maybe. I suppose even now when I look back at the difference of, I thought, you know, what I thought then and what I thought now, you know, and we were saying about, like, obviously I came into a white family, and again, it was always a positive thing about my colour, which was brilliant, and it gave me that positivity. I think the one thing that got me about the family was that I never looked like anybody. So you'd be out and, like, my sister would say, oh, or people would say, God, your sister's the image of your dad or your cousin or your mom or something. And I never looked like anybody apart from people that maybe were on television because we had the same colour of skin or whatever. So, you know, and I always thought that I'd look more like my African side than my Irish side. But then when I met my Irish side, I was like, oh my God, the similarities, like, the Irish side, yeah. Yeah, I feel like I look more like my Irish side, which is something that completely blew me away.
Thinking Aloud, Thinking Together is a new conversation series from Skeen in partnership with the Museum of Literature Ireland, amplifying voices that have been silenced in Irish cultural life. It brings together artists, writers and thinkers whose work offers a radical new perspective on existing narratives. Thinking Aloud, Thinking Together provides a space to discuss points of connection and concern in contemporary culture. These conversations explore topics that are seldom spoken of in mainstream public discourse in Ireland, such as identity, relationships, shame, exclusion, and reversing the impact of erasure from history and culture. It offers a space for us to reconsider our relationship with one another, to reimagine the ways in which we live, and to rewrite the legacies we leave behind. Supported by the Rowan Trust and the Arts Council of Ireland. Produced by Ian Mullaney. Music by Oisín Mulch Pilo. For more information, visit skeenpress.com.